Hey, we're going to get started with our program this evening, and I recognize that most of you, I think, are still sampling the dessert bar and having coffee, and I invite you to continue. But I want to go ahead now and introduce our guest speaker for tonight, our keynote speaker. His Excellency Dr. Hussein Hassouna is the ambassador of the League of Arab States to the United States. With regard to his academic credentials, they are legion. He holds both an LLB and a PhD in international law from Cambridge University in England. And he has lectured in major universities in the United States, Canada, England, and France, including such schools as Harvard, Georgetown, Yale, UCLA, here at Duke, McGill in Canada, Cambridge, and Sorbonne. That's quite a slate of universities. He is also the author of a book on Middle Eastern conflicts and numerous articles on international law and world affairs in various publications, including the American Journal of International Law, the World Policy Journal, and United Nations publications. As to his diplomatic career, after serving as a representative of Egypt or a member of the Egyptian delegation to numerous Middle Eastern peace negotiations and United Nations conferences, he was a member of the permanent mission of Egypt to the United Nations from 1971 for 5 years until 1976. For the next 2 years, the ambassador was special advisor to the Egyptian foreign minister on legal and international organization affairs. From 1978 until 1982, he was political counselor at the Egyptian embassy in Washington, his first tour in Washington, and then went to France to become the director of the Egyptian Press and Information Bureau in Paris. From 1986 until 1989, Ambassador Hassouna was Director of Cabinet to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. Thereafter, he served in 2 foreign postings, first as the Ambassador of Egypt to Yugoslavia, and then immediately thereafter as the Ambassador of Egypt to Morocco. In 1996, he spent a year as Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt for International Legal Affairs and Treaties, and then he became the Ambassador of the League of Arab States to the United Nations, a position he held for 5 years before taking his current posting 7 years ago. He's been in that position as Ambassador of the League of Arab States to the United States. Ambassador, we are delighted to have you returning to Duke. He was here in 2003. And we're delighted that you can also bring your wife, your lovely wife, Naveen, with you at our conference. Personally, ever since the ambassador was down here in 2003, I have called him every year and tried to get him down here. And oftentimes he'll say, well, Scott, I'd like to come, but I have a conflict. I've got to be at a conference. So I say, well, can I send you the ambassador to Iraq instead? Next year, well, I can't make it. Can I send you the ambassador from Jordan? So we have had every year at our conferences very prestigious ambassadors, but none as prestigious as having Ambassador Hassouna back at Duke. Ambassador, welcome back to our conference.
Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm not interrupting your dessert. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Silliman, for your introduction. And thank you for coming tonight to listen to me after a long day of debates in this important conference. And thank you to my friends who came to give me moral support. I have many friends who live in this area, and when they heard that I was coming to speak at Duke, they said they will come and attend this event. I am, as you mentioned, Professor Silliman, I'm very happy to be back to Duke University. I came down in 2003. I wish I could congratulate Duke for winning the basketball championship. But anyway, it stays in the States since North Carolina University won, so it's still a home success. When I came 6 years ago, it was a difficult time for me, to tell you the truth. This was just before the outbreak of the Iraqi war. And there was a lot of concern in the Arab world about that war. There was a lot of tension in US-Arab relations. There were worries that the United States would go it alone without United Nations mandate, that Iraq, an important Arab country, would suffer, would be destabilized, and would destabilize the whole region. It did happen, and of course, I think one of the achievements of this war that we got rid of Saddam Hussein. But on the other hand, I think the people of Iraq who had been suffering under crippling sanctions for so many years imposed by the international community have continued to suffer as a result of the civil war that followed. So today when I speak, in spite of the big challenges, I think, which we face in this world today, Afghanistan, Somalia, problems that are not solved in the Middle East, I think there are also some bright aspects and some hope. Iraq is on the right track, to come out of its nightmare, I think. It needs a lot of work, needs a lot of efforts, but I think it is on the right track. Lebanon, that about a year ago had no government, no president, was on the brink of civil war, has today a government, has a strong president, and is about to hold elections soon. And it is, in a way, it is a model for the rest of the Middle East in its democratic process again. On the other hand, in spite of the economic, financial crisis which we are all facing in the world, I think we've seen the world coming together. And at the latest meeting in London of the 20th, with the participation of the Arab world represented by Saudi Arabia, the world leaders came together and presented a plan of action to counter that challenge. In Afghanistan, again, the world is now adopting a collective approach in order to find a solution to that problem. So I think there are some bright spots in spite of the difficult challenges. But I think the most important development that we've seen in the last years is that there is a new administration in the United States. And in my few remarks, I will share with you the view of the Arab world vis-à-vis this new administration. What we think, what we expected from them, if they have lived up to our expectations, and what we can do to work together with administrations to promote a better world. So to start with, I will tell you that the Arab world, together with the rest of the world, followed very closely the elections that took place. They were long elections, but I think they represented the democratic process at work in the United States. And for us in the rest of the world, we could only admire that process. The diversity, the competition, the grassroots involvement, the minority involvement, and the outcome. Sometimes, to be honest with you, we regretted that race and religion were mentioned, but I think that eventually with the election of President Obama, we looked at it as a historical event, not only for this country, which managed after many years to overcome the race problem by electing an Afro-American president, but also for the rest of the world who saw in that young, educated president a sign of hope and a sign of change. So I think it was received well in the Arab and the Muslim world. But some were skeptics. They said, can President Obama, with his good intentions, can he really change policies, especially towards the Middle East? Isn't American foreign policy rooted in some basic continuity, some basic strategic objectives that cannot shift overnight and deal with the issues of the world as maybe the world would like and expect? And there are some people who still believe this. So when President Obama came into power, I think we also looked at him as someone who, although an American, a Christian American, he had roots in Africa. He had roots in the Muslim world. He lived in the Muslim world. So he had a broad outlook about the rest of the world. And we saw this as a positive element in the next president. But as Colin Powell courageously said one day when they were asking him, what about the religion of Obama? He said, and what about if he's Muslim? Shouldn't any American citizen have the right to become president one day, regardless if he's a Muslim, a Christian, or a Jew? So we, I think, appreciated that comment because it shows how America, being a Muslim, a melting pot, has given to its citizens equal rights and duties, and that anyone can achieve the highest successful post or the highest rank if he is qualified for it. So what do the Arab world expect from the Obama administration? First of all, it is looking to the United States as a country today that enjoys unchallenged supremacy. And that is why it is looking at the United States as a country that should restore political and moral leadership. And it should be a model for the rest of the world. And this can only be achieved if the United States pursues policies that are fair, if it engages the rest of the world, if it listens to the rest of the world, and does not impose its views unilaterally. I think we also expect the United States under the new administration to adopt policies of peace and justice. And this is particularly true in the Middle East. We want the United States to help us resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict. That is the core of the issue in the region. We want the United States to adopt fair policies. As we say, we want the United States to be an honest broker between the Arabs and the Israelis, and not just side with the Israelis. I think we also would like the United States to follow a policy of dialogue, of engagement, even with countries it doesn't agree with. We want the United States to resort to diplomacy, not to confrontation, and not to imposition of sanction or threatening the use of force. We want the United States to resort to multilateralism and not to unilateral approaches. And this means to work through the United Nations, to support the United Nations, because the United Nations is the only forum in the world that is global in nature. And today's problems in the world are all global in nature, and they need global solutions. And that is why we have to work through the United Nations. We also want the United States to work with regional actors like the League of Arab States and other regional organizations, because they understand more the issues, the roots of the problems, and solutions can often be achieved through regional actors and not through outside powers who sometimes have different agendas. And then you want the United States to abide by the respect of the rule of law. And this is extremely important because the United States is perceived in the world as the one who is defending the rule of law internally to its citizens and internationally. It has a long tradition of respect for the rule of law, because the rule of law is related to the question of democracy, and the United States is a strong defender of democracy and of human rights. That is why we want the United States to do this by supporting the United Nations, its resolutions, but also by not adopting double standards. We were sometimes dismayed when the United States considers that some resolutions should be implemented vis-à-vis certain states, whereas others are not enforced against those who violate them. We want the United States to join international conventions. Certain conventions that have been adopted by the international community up to now have not been adhered to by the United States. Well, the law of the sea conventions, the Convention on Protection of the Child. I was told, and I don't know if I'm true, I guess our friend, the ex-legal advisor can tell me, that for instance, the Convention on the Protection of the Child, it is only the United States and Somalia who are not members. Can you imagine Somalia, a non-state almost? So I think there's a lot to be done. The International Criminal Court is another case in point. I know that under the former administration, there were efforts to be made, for instance, through the Senate, to try and ratify the law of the sea conventions. And there is now talk again about reviewing the position of the United States towards the International Criminal Court. Although, personally, I think it will not happen very soon. I think that the Pentagon is reluctant or concerned about the United States accepting that its citizens abroad, especially all these peacekeeping forces, might be one day subject to an international criminal system, which is not a national one. So they are difficult issues. But we also want the United States to respect the international humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions that apply to all people under occupation, to all prisoners of war. We want the United States also, when dealing with the question of terrorism, not to perceive it as a threat to national security that needs only military means to confront it, but to look at the root causes of terrorism, to understand that terrorism emerges in societies that are deprived of education, where there are a lot of unemployed, where people are in despair because conflicts are not resolved. So it is only through a comprehensive approach that we can resolve that problem. And then we want the United States to support democracy in the Arab world and the Muslim world. Yes, but not as an outside model, not as an imposed model according to Western concepts. It has to be a concept that is in accordance with the tradition, the evolution in those societies, their cultural and religious heritage. And this is extremely important. And then when you talk about democracy and you call for elections, I think the United States has to be prepared to accept the result of these elections, and not say, well, those elections, we can not accept their outcome because somehow they are inconsistent with our view of what should have happened. So this is a little bit the feeling in the Arab world and I would say the Muslim world as well, towards what we expect from the new administration. Well, let me briefly now mention how did the new administration live up to our expectations. First of all, from day one, this administration was faced with many challenges. The priority was for the economic challenges facing not only the United States, but it has become a global challenge facing the whole world. So the Obama administration has focused on this problem, but has not neglected the foreign challenges. And it has done so at a hectic, accelerated pace, to the extent that those who follow the comments have heard that why is he not focusing just on the main priority? Why is he trying to do everything at the same time? The Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, the financial problem, Latin America. Every day he's facing a new challenge. Well, I think that there is one obvious good reason for that they are all interrelated. We live in a world where one challenge is interrelated to the other. The internal challenges are interrelated to the external ones, and vice versa. You can no more just focus on one problem. We live in a global world. Everything is interrelated. And I think here I would refer to an issue which you have been debating in this conference, the issue of national security. National security can no longer be perceived as just an internal matter. It is no more a question of facing up terrorism, a question of intelligence. It is a much broader concept. And I will tell you, 3 days ago I was at the Library of Congress. There was an event, and the main speaker was the National Security Advisor, General James Jones. A very impressive man. One thing I learned about him is how fluent he was in French. So I told him, "You speak like a Frenchman. How come?" And he told me, "Well, I lived 15 years of my life in France." His father was a businessman and he went to school there. So I said, "Well, you know how to deal with the Europeans now." He said, "Yes, but I also know how to deal with you, the Arabs, because I was also coordinating security between the Palestinians and Israelis for a while, so I understand very well your problem. So he's an experienced and really impressive man. And he talked about the national security. And he said, national security today is not just to have a strong army. It is not just to have a strong intelligence. National security is a broader concept. It involves economics. It involves the global economy. It involves energy. Energy is affecting the whole planet. And it also involves peacemaking, because if you have a stable world, if you manage to solve issues in the rest of the world, this will affect your national security. So I think these are good issues for your next conference. Maybe you should not just talk about national security from a narrow perspective. You should expand it and talk about the world economic situation, the energy impact, the peacemaking, peace building in the world, how it affects your national security. One thing we also noticed in the new administration is the different tone, the different discourse, and the different approach, whether in public or in private meetings we had with members of the administration. And as you noticed in the speeches delivered by President Obama, a sense of humility, a sense of acknowledging mistakes. And I think, as our speaker was saying today at lunchtime, this does not reflect weakness. I think it reflects self-assurance. And I think we are happy to see that. Maybe the real change that we in the Arab world and the Muslim world have noticed is from the very first day. In his inauguration speech, President Mubarak talked that he wants to engage the Muslim world. President Obama said that he wants to engage the Muslim world, that he wants to have a new relationship with the Muslim world based on common interests and mutual respect. Well, this resonated in the rest of the world. It is something we do welcome. But he followed this immediately by giving his first interview to Al Arabiya, an Arab satellite television channel. And then when he went to Istanbul, another Muslim country, he went to parliament there and he made a beautiful speech. And he said that the United States was never and will never be at war with the Muslim world. And he underlined his respect for the Muslim world. So the whole tone is from our point of view, extremely positive. And it has already changed the perspective, the perception of the Arab world and the Muslim world towards the United States and its president. We have seen also that the president has been involved in engaging countries that have had different policies and views, like Syria. He sent representatives to Syria. The chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Kerry, I met him once and he told me how pleased he was. He went to meet President Bashar al-Assad and he talked to him. And in spite of the differences, he said there are good prospects that Syria, who plays an important role in the region, can again be a friend of the United States and help and be involved in negotiating with the Israelis again and find a solution, helping the neighboring country of Iraq, and so on. He even made a gesture to Iran. Iran, by the way, is a Muslim country, a neighboring country of the Arab world, but it is not an Arab country. It is not a member of the Arab League, because many people have asked me sometimes, is Iran a member of your organization? And I say no. We differ with them often, because we think that their policies sometimes are trying to extend their influence in the region. They have problems with many Arab countries, like the United Arab Emirates, where there are differences over 3 islands, and they refuse to settle this issue or even to have recourse to arbitration or International Court of Justice. They made occasional claims against Bahrain, that is an Arab country that has a Shiite majority, but is a country that we strongly defend, and they are part of the Arab League. So they have, and in Iraq, they have interfered sometimes to the extent that the Arab world has questioned their goals and aspiration. So, but we have to deal with them. They are an important country, and the United States has adopted this policy of dialogue with them. The United States has recently decided to join the Six Powers talk with the Europeans. Yesterday, the president of Iraq, for the first time, made some positive comments and saying that he's ready to dialogue with the United States if this is based on mutual respect. So Iran is certainly an important country. And the United States has also proposed 2 weeks ago, there was an important conference that met in The Hague on the issue of Afghanistan. And the United States has proposed that Iran takes part in this conference. I happened to be there and to represent the Arab League, and I talked with the Iranian delegation, and they were pretty upbeat. They said, for the first time, the United States now treats us as equal. We are represented here as equal with the rest of the 80 countries that took part in the conference. And so I think this is a good development. I don't say that this will lead to solving all the issues with Iran, but I think we should try to get them on board instead of isolate them and impose sanctions. So I think also related to this issue is the question of nuclear weapons. Again, we welcome in the Arab world and the Muslim world the call by President Obama to free the world of nuclear weapons. He said this recently, and he called for the strengthening of the non-proliferation treaty system. We believe that this is a very positive development, but we believe that this can only happen if the Treaty on Non-Proliferation becomes universal. And there are still certain countries in the world that have not joined that treaty. And this includes India, Pakistan, Cuba, and Israel. So you cannot have double standards. If you want a universal treaty applying to everyone, if you want all countries to be subject to the system of safeguards and inspection of the International Atomic Agency, then I think everyone has to be part of that treaty. And for us in the Middle East, we think that the best solution to avert an arms race is to create in the Middle East a zone free of all weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons. And again, we think that this is a way to have Iran stop its nuclear designs, but also Israel, who has nuclear weapons, should be part of the treaty. And if this happens, it will certainly reinforce the efforts to achieve a comprehensive peace in the region. Another thing respecting the rule of law, I think as lawyers we have already seen the decisions taken by the Obama administration on closing Guantanamo within a year, on closing the CIA detention centers, on banning torture, on eliminating the term of enemy combatants, on reaffirming the respect of international law and the Geneva Conventions and so on. So again, we would say that this is a very good development. Let me briefly talk about, I don't want to go too long, but let me briefly talk about some specific issues. One of them which concerns us, of course, very much is the Arab-Israeli problem. Here, again, the new administration, in the first days of its functioning, appointed a Middle East envoy, the person of George Mitchell, a distinguished lawyer, a distinguished diplomat who helped in bringing about peace to Northern Ireland. So why not giving him a free hand to try and bring about peace in the Middle East? And again, the president has continuously reaffirmed his commitment to achieve a comprehensive peace, his intention to exert efforts from day one, and not, to be honest with you, to wait like other administrations did. And this applies to Republicans and it applies to Democrats, who waited till the last year of the presidency when they started getting involved in the Middle East issue, calling for conferences, submitting proposals. I think obviously this doesn't work because this problem is so complex that you need to work step by step. You need to be engaged from the very beginning. And it is only the United States, with its strong relations, both with the Arab world and with Israel, that can bring about a difference. And I say this out of experience. I've been involved in negotiations between Egypt and Israel. And I know that without the personal involvement and the personal commitment of President Carter, when he used to join our meetings, we were sitting in Blair House in Washington. He used to join our meetings and present proposals to compromise, to bridge the gap. He shuttled between Israel and the Arab world. Without that, we would not have achieved peace. And I think we need a similar commitment today. And we need the support from everyone. We need the support from the Arab world. And the Arab world is ready to make peace. The Arab world has presented in 2002 at the summit meeting of the Arab League in Beirut, the Arab Peace Initiative. That is a comprehensive framework to achieve peace between Arabs and Israelis, based on a simple principle of land for peace. We are asking the Israelis to withdraw totally to the 1967 borders, and in return, the Arabs are ready to recognize Israel, to enter into normal diplomatic relations with Israel, but also provided Israel settles the refugee problem, accepts the creation of a viable Palestinian state, and also settles the issue of Jerusalem by giving East Jerusalem to the Palestinians. So the solution of the Arab-Israeli problems are not difficult. They have been debated all over. They have been by all administrations. They have been discussed. We know the all the contours, the paradigms of a settlement. The problem is the political will doesn't exist. And we have two big issues today. The Palestinians are divided, and in Israel we have a right-wing government that came into office that refuses to accept so far the notion of a two-state solution and an independent Palestinian state. And it continues the policy of settlements. So I think the United States is still at the learning stage. They are listening. Mitchell is in the region today. Secretary of State Clinton went there. But one point, the United States has to present its own view, what it thinks is a plan that can achieve peace, what it thinks is fair for the Israelis and is fair for the Palestinians and the Arabs. I think if this doesn't happen, we might stay in this unsettled situation for years to come. And the more you postpone a fair settlement, the more it becomes complicated and difficult to solve. Iraq is another issue for the Arab world. I think that we should focus on two main elements in Iraq. To preserve the unity of Iraq, because there were some talks, even in this country, even in Congress, about maybe the best solution would be to opt for a partition of Iraq. The Sunnis in one region, the Kurds in one region, the Shiites in one. No, this would only lead to more bloodshed. It will lead to intervention of the neighboring countries. We want the Iraqis to remain united. We want Iraqis also to reconcile, to give up the sectarian divisions. Iraqis should look at themselves as belonging to one nation, as Iraqi nationals, and not as Shiites or Sunnis, as Christians or Muslims. They should look at themselves as being Iraqis. And we are trying to help. The Arab world is trying to help. We are sending now our diplomats to open their embassies there. I think they need economic assistance. And even although we support the strategy of the United States, of the new administration, that by August 2010, they would reduce drastically their combat forces, and that by 2011, all the forces will leave. There are still problems which need to be addressed. For instance, we have to try to have the Iraqis agree on sharing their oil resources. We also have to stop the brain drain that is happening. The best Iraqis are leaving the country because of insecurity, because of worries about the future. We must help the refugees that left and that went to the neighboring countries, to Syria, to Jordan, to Egypt, to come back, to resettle. So there are huge challenges, and they cannot be settled unless we help them and we work together, the United States, the Arab world, the neighboring countries. Afghanistan, again, is a big challenge. Some people at this conference said we are optimistic about solving it. Some said, well, it will never be solved. I think that it can be solved, but there is no quick fix. It is a long-term challenge. It needs a collective approach, and I think this conference I attended in The Hague adopted this approach. It invited all the neighboring countries. It invited international organizations. And its approach was that the Afghans, they need support, they need economic support. There must be also more military forces to confront the extremists, but it is not through military means that you can solve this issue. You have to reconcile again the Afghans together, and the Arab states are playing a role in that. Saudi Arabia has sometimes some ties with those tribes. It is trying to reconcile it. We have to get the moderate elements of the Taliban, not the Qaeda. The Qaeda, they want to fight. They don't want to compromise. But the Taliban have elements that are ready to be part of the political system. We must include them in that system. We must build institutions. We must learn them to respect the rule of law. We must try to fight corruptions. You must help them to get rid of growing their poppies and drugs, relying on the money to finance their activities. So I think there's a lot to be done in various fields, and it needs a comprehensive approach. And then one very important thing is, in the military operations, you have always to avoid civilian casualties, because this is the thing that makes the population rise against what they perceive sometimes as occupiers. And you should tell them that, and this is true everywhere, that the United States or the NATO forces or whoever, we are not here to occupy you. We are here to help you achieve stability, peace, and then we are out. It's your problem and it's your responsibility. This is, I think, the approach the United States and the rest of the world should use when you have a presence in Afghanistan, in Iraq, or in any other country. Finally, I think how to strengthen the relations between the United States and the Arab and the Muslim world. In many ways, more contact between officials, but also people-to-people contact are extremely important. I think academics, exchange of academics. I think business contacts and joint projects can be very beneficial. Exchange even of sport in the field of sports. For instance, you remember the ping pong diplomacy that opened the way to relations between China and the United States. Maybe your national team here of basketball can go and play in some of the universities. You have a proliferation of American universities today in the Middle East. And people are very happy about it, but I warn you, they should not be only targeting the elite. I think you should also get the people who cannot afford a very expensive education to be involved in this education. You should tell them that you're there to improve the middle class, and not just the families of the rulers and so on who can afford that expensive education. So I think that there are many ways of dialogue, of interfaith dialogue between all religions that have all common values. I think that this notion of clash between culture and civilization should be completely disregarded and condemned. Cultures and civilizations interact together, they are enriching each other, and we have to respect the diversity of different cultures. And then there are many ways of also, I can tell you something I've been involved in. About a month ago, we had a very big event in Washington, D.C. And this was, for the first time, we had a cultural and artistic festival for the Arab world, including 22 Arab countries. And they were all represented by 800 performers. And for 3 weeks, it was sold out. There was not a single seat available. Americans, Arab Americans, they wanted to go. There were plays, there was music, there was dance, there was poetry. And people, for the first time, realized that the Arabs have a great culture, that have great arts. And one of the most successful, for instance, performances was a young Somali. He was not a pirate. He was a rap dancer, and people were clapping, and the young people were extremely happy. And I would say that the administration also made a nice gesture in the last evening when there was a nice performance by Oman. We saw Mrs. Michelle Obama coming and following it, and she said this is the best way to get really people together from different cultures and backgrounds. So I think there are many ways. Let me conclude now by saying that there is a lot of hope now what the new administration can do. We heard good words, we heard good intentions. Sometimes people say, well, we still have to see some real action and really implementation of those policies. I think that we also need, on our part, on the part of the Arab world, to do our share. And I think we have to do this by supporting the new policies, by working with the new administration, by getting our act together in reforming our societies, in educating our people, in getting rid of corruption, in finding solutions to our own problem. But we need the help of the United States. And I think if we work together, we can really achieve the results we all aspire to. Thank you very much.
You want to change some questions?
Sure.
We've got some time for questions. And again, we do not have the microphones here. So if you could stand and speak as loudly as you can. And I see John Bellinger right there. Hand up. John, we'll give you the first one.
That's a brilliant presentation. I think a wonderful tour d'horizon of both American politics, incredibly perceptive. As the former legal advisor, I have to say it's not everybody who gets right into the details of the law, the Sea Treaty, the Rome Statute, and I think gets it exactly right. I hear lots of Europeans who get it exactly wrong on thinking, well, Obama will sign up immediately to the Rome Statute. And you put your finger, I think, exactly on it. Brilliant all across the map. I want to focus on Iran. The Obama administration is clearly reaching out to the Arab world, to the Muslim world, as you rightly say, to Iran. You suggest, you applaud that. You suggest that sanctions are not working, and I got the suggestion that you thought that maybe the international community should lighten up. I think note that double standards are harmful when we see that Israel has got, as everyone suspects, nuclear weapons. So how can we lean quite so hard on Iran? But nonetheless, that really is, I think, amongst the top concerns for the Obama administration in the Middle East. And it's a concern for the Arab League as well, and for Saudi Arabia, for Egypt. And so while there may be some dialogue, initially it doesn't seem to be very well received from Ahmadinejad. And I guess I would ask you from the perspective of the Arab League, what should the international community and what should the United States in its leadership position do about the problem posed by Iran? And I'm going to take a couple of things off the table for you. So you can't say, well, Israel has got nuclear weapons and that Iran has got the right to a peaceful nuclear program. But the fact is the Security Council has issued resolution after resolution of which Iran has ignored. And we have deep concerns that they don't want to just have a peaceful nuclear program. So that's really going to be a top priority for the Obama administration. And you are a keen observer of Washington and American politics. He's going to be under pressure from a segment of the population as well to do something about that in Iran. So I guess what is your recommendation both for the international community and for the Obama administration with respect to the threat posed by Iran's nuclear program?
Well, thank you, John, for your issue. Of course, this is one of the crucial issues in the region today. I know that the Iranian situation is very complex for one single reason, is that it is a complex system, and it's a divided system. Some of them are moderates, some of them want to reach out to the world, some of them want better relations with the Arab world, with the United States, and some of them are still the hardliners who do not want that. And the key is still in the hands of the supreme leader, Khomeini. He's the one who has this, not only the political power, he has the spiritual power over the rest. Ahmadinejad, yeah, he's a spokesman, but he has no all the attributes of power. So there's a big conflict internally, and that is why their policies are so inconsistent, I think. You know that up to now, Egypt has not managed to have normal relations with Iran. And this goes back to the time when the Shah of Iran was overthrown, and he went around the world seeking asylum somewhere. And I used to be in the embassy here in Washington at the time, and the only leader of the world who gave him refuge and asylum was President Sadat of Egypt. I remember I used to receive calls and saying, my God, everyone, they're all cowards. They're not willing to take him in. But President Sadat, who was a man of vision, a man of courage, he said, this is a man of need. He is sick, he has been overthrown, he has stood by our side, he has helped us before, we will take him. And they have never forgiven us for that. He's buried in one of the mosques in Cairo, but up to now, we have problems with them. So it's a complicated system of government. But I think you cannot neglect them, you cannot avoid them. They're a force in the region. Being Shiite leaders, they have a lot of influence on the Shiite community in the rest of the Arab and the Muslim world. So you have to deal with them. I think it was very wise by President Obama to say we will join the next round of talks with the Europeans. I think they're still debating the issue, should we do this without precondition? Because you remember the former administration said we will only do this if during the first phase they would stop their nuclear program and the enriched uranium. Now they're saying, well, maybe we do not put this as a condition and we just see how they will respond. I think it's worth to try, call it a bluff, but certainly I think it's worth to try out how they will react if they are sincere. And we tell them, if you want to develop nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, it's your right. Under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, you and all developing countries have the right to do so. But there is a red line, and this is that you cannot develop nuclear weapons. And you have to put your installations under international control. So maybe the approach would be one day, yes, go on with your nuclear program, but then you cannot cross that line and develop nuclear weapons. And this will need the involvement of friends of Iran, people who can tell them, we are not trying to stop you to develop nuclear energy, but we cannot accept that you become a threatening nuclear power in the region, because this will lead to an arms race. And if Iran acquires nuclear weapon, Israel already has them, then I don't see why some other countries in the region will not say, well, in order to defend ourselves, we also have to acquire nuclear weapons. So I think it's worth trying this track. I don't guarantee that it will lead anywhere, but they also have a question of ego. And I notice this when I talk to them sometimes, that they say, well, we are a country with a great civilization, a great history, and we want to be recognized and accepted. And they have been always put isolated.
Coming here, with respect to the Arab festival that you referred to in Washington, I don't know if you know that one of the music portions of that festival, presenting Arab music from films over the decades, first appeared here at Duke University just before that festival to sell out crowds. It was a great event here.
No, I didn't
Duke
know
is
that.
very,
I didn't
very
know
proud
that.
of that. My question involves a crisis involving an Arab League member that you didn't talk about tonight, and that is Sudan. And what is the Arab League's expectations of this administration with respect to Sudan, the Darfur crisis, and other aspects of Sudan? And perhaps you could also discuss the Arab League's position vis-a-vis ICC President Omar al-Bashir.
Well, Sudan is an important member of the League. The League comprises countries in Asia and in Africa, and Sudan is, of course, an important African country. It is the largest African country, and this is one of its problems, I think. Yes, because it has so many neighbors. It has a weak central government, and many its societies are still at the tribal stage. So they had a long civil war between the north and the south that was settled, or at least brought about. They signed a peace agreement with the help of the neighbors. Egypt was very much involved in that, but mainly the United States. Again, the United States showed some leadership, and the presidential envoy, Senator Danforth, played a very important role in bringing about peace between North and South. The question of Darfur erupted after that. Again, it is a very complicated issue, but it is also a historical problem, going back to fighting between different tribes over water resources and others. And then also the people of Darfur, different rebel groups that aspire to share resources with the North. They want the same sharing in power also, like the South. So it's a extremely difficult issue, and it led to a terrible civil war. Thousands were killed, refugees, and so on. The international community was involved. The Sudanese, from the beginning, took a view that this is a civil war. We are a legitimate government. We do not allow outside intervention. But then the international community told them, if you cannot settle this, you need help. We cannot let all these civilians suffer without and they accepted an African peacekeeping force. And then over the years, this African force proved not to be able, not to have the resources, the manpower to preserve peace, to protect the civilians. So this was enlarged to a hybrid force that involved elements from the United Nations as well. So now we have this force in place. It is not complete, also because some of those who committed forces or resources did not deliver it, and I must say some of them from the big powers. And the issue now is that all this there was some hope. There was an Arab peace initiative that this problem cannot be solved unless there are meaningful negotiations between the government of the Sudan and the rebel groups. And they invited the rebel groups to come, and they met with the Sudanese government in Doha, in Qatar. The main rebel group went there and signed an agreement. And we were trying to get the other rebel groups that had not signed the agreements to join, because we want everyone to be part of that peace deal. What happened is that the International Criminal Court, upon reference from the Security Council, Mr. Ocampo, the public prosecutor, which we remember we met at we had a big debate at Yale University about Darfur with his presence. He issued that order, arrest warrant against President Bashir. Our position was that to issue that order at this very time is very ill-advised, because we thought when you are in the middle of very difficult and sensitive negotiations to try to settle this issue between the government and the rebels, to issue that order might undermine the whole thing. And it did happen, because immediately the rebels who signed the agreement came back and said, why should we abide by an agreement with a government that is led by someone who is called a criminal and has to go to the International Criminal Court? The problem also with that warrant is that it is for the first time that this court issues a warrant against a sitting president, a president who is active, who takes part in international conferences, who travels. I do not want to defend him, because I think you need the evidence to say if he's really responsible for that. One thing which is clear is that this chamber of the court said that there were crimes against humanity, but there was no genocide. So already the term genocide as a crime that is premeditated against liquidating certain ethnic groups and so on was disregarded. And it shows you that sometimes terms are used in a political context and not in a legal one. But we are facing, in my view, two big problems. And we have an expert here on the International Criminal Court, my friend John Dugard. In my view, this warrant has raised two problems. One, a political one, that the negotiations might not continue, and it might even affect maybe the agreement between the North and the South, and the whole situation in Iran, in Sudan, that has been so vulnerable, might unravel into chaos maybe, and there's a danger. And the second issue concerns the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court should be a completely independent court. And I remember maybe you were also at Rome, or not, John. When we negotiated the statute of the court, there was a position of those countries who wanted this court to be absolutely independent and not connected to the Security Council, because they said the Security Council is a political body. And if we have any linkage, it means that the political body can refer the cases according to its own whim sometimes. And to be honest with you, according to the position of the permanent members, those who have the veto capacity. There was a link established, and for some reason the Security Council referred this case to the International Criminal Court to put pressure on Sudan. And maybe it was well-intentioned. But at one point, the African and the Arab states went to the Security Council and told them, there is an article in the statute of the court that says that you can suspend that process for a year. And we asked for this suspension because we wanted the Sudanese government to continue its peace negotiation with the rebels to bring about a solution to the problem. But the Security Council has not accepted this. So we face now a situation where African and Arabs, and they're united on this, say this court is politicizing the issue. This is an African leader. The Security Council wants to, to bring him to justice. But what about if we look into other situations, like in Iraq, there were crimes committed, in Afghanistan, in Palestine? No one talks about that. So is this really justice? So it is an extremely difficult issue. And I know that the United States is very much concerned. I know that Senator Kerry is going there to the region. The government of Sudan, as a retaliation, has expelled a number of humanitarian organizations that were working there. And we are trying now to ask them to allow them back, if not to replace them by other organizations, like the International Committee of the Red Cross, Red Crescents, because they claim that those organizations have been given secretly evidence to the International Criminal Court. So it is a big, complex problem, but the United States, again, is getting involved, and we support their involvement, and we want to work with the United States to find a solution to the issue of Sudan.
Ambassador, I'm going to exercise the prerogative of saying we'll take no more public questions now, but I suspect that there will be those who will be up here as soon as I close to press you for more. But I want to suggest also that in your comments tonight, sir, you have touched, first of all, on the very issues that we will be probing tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon, whether it be the International Criminal Court, John and Kurt, whether it be my panel on detention and prosecution of terrorists and how we deal with that, and also Bruce Jellenson's panel on how does the United States gain back in the international community. I think in your comments you've touched on all of them and perhaps not left too much for us to debate tomorrow.
No, but this was my view.
But you have not minced words with us, and you have told us exactly what the Arab League does expect of our new administration. I think you've suggested very strongly that you will be watching for action and not just rhetoric, and so it will take time. And I think with a new administration still filling its positions as we've discussed, hopefully over the year, the next year and the following year, that there will be a coming together of the Arab community, the United States, a movement more towards the international community, and we look forward to achieving some of those goals that you've set out in your comments tonight. So we want to thank you, sir, again for your comments and being here, and a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, I think if I get him a glass of wine, he'll probably stay here for a few more minutes for those of you who want to talk. As a reminder, we'll be convening for continental breakfast tomorrow morning back in the auditorium at 8 o'clock. Then I'll bring our first panel tomorrow morning at 8:45. And we very much look forward to seeing you there tomorrow. We hope this has been a pleasant evening, both with cuisine, fellowship, and the comments of the ambassador. Thank you and good night.